The battlefield had once been a place filled with noise. Engines screaming, metal clashing, humans shouting commands through broken radios. But now it lay completely quiet. Only the wind moved across the land, lifting dust like ghosts rising from forgotten graves. The sky above was gray and stretched endlessly, as if it too was tired of watching both sides destroy everything they once cared about. In the middle of this silence walked a lone human soldier, barely standing, armor cracked and darkened with burns. His name was Elias, though even he could not remember the last time anyone had spoken it aloud. He moved slowly, each step heavy, as if the earth itself tried to pull him back into the ruins where his squad had fallen. His helmet visor was broken, and through the sharp lines of shattered glass, his tired eyes searched for anything that felt alive. But the land looked like it had died with the war. Burned metal lay like twisted skeletons, and the ground was filled with black scars where explosions had torn open the soil. Elias breathed unevenly. He did not know how he survived the final blast. He only remembered a sudden white light, a force that pushed the air from his lungs, and then nothing but quiet darkness. When he woke hours or maybe days later, he found himself buried under fallen armor plates and ash. Somehow his heart still beat. Somehow his lungs still moved. Somehow he walked. He continued forward until he saw something he did not expect, light. Not sunlight, but a soft blue glow flickering from behind a cluster of broken vehicles. Elias blinked, unsure if his mind was playing tricks on him. The war had ended with both armies losing count of their fallen. No one came back to rescue the dead. So who could possibly be here? With weak legs and shaking hands, Elias followed the glow. Each step felt like crossing a long memory, each decision guided by instinct rather than hope. When he reached the other side of the destroyed machines, he froze. There, standing in an open clearing of cracked earth, was an alien woman. She was tall, with skin that shimmered faintly like moonlight touching water. Her silver eyes scanned the ruins with quiet sorrow, and her hair, long, smooth, almost weightless in appearance, blew gently with the dusty wind. She wore the armor of her people, though parts of it were broken and scorched, showing she had survived her own share of pain. Elias felt vulnerable in that moment. He had no strength left to fight, no weapon ready, no shield to raise. If she attacked him, he knew he could not even raise an arm in defense. But she did not reach for her weapon. Instead, she turned slowly, as though sensing a presence she had never expected to feel again. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, the world seemed to stop. The dust in the air hung motionless. The wind paused. Even Elias' heartbeat felt like it forgot its rhythm. The alien woman stared at him, her lips parting slowly, her expression shifting between disbelief, fear, and something much softer, something painfully human. Her breath trembled. Her hands shook at her sides. Her eyes glistened like someone seeing a long-lost truth return from the dead. Then, in a voice barely louder than the wind, she whispered words Elias never imagined hearing from an alien, especially not here, especially not now. "This can't be, you're alive." Her tone carried a weight he did not understand, as if his existence meant something far greater than survival. Elias felt confusion, but also a strange warmth rising inside his chest. She knew him, not as an enemy, not as a threat, but as someone whose death she had once believed in deeply. And in that single frozen moment, the long, broken battlefield did not feel empty anymore. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had expected, a story awakened from ashes, breathing again in two shaking hearts. The alien woman, whose name Elias soon learned was Sarai, did not move at first. She kept her eyes on him, as if trying to confirm that he was real, that he had not been a hallucination born from exhaustion or fear. Her silver eyes reflected the fading light of the ruined battlefield, and for the first time, Elias saw a mixture of emotions he could never have imagined an alien could feel: grief, relief, and something dangerously close to hope. "Elias," she whispered again, her voice shaking, we thought you were gone." He did not respond. Words felt heavy on his lips, unnecessary when the weight of what he had survived was already pressing down on him. Instead, he only nodded slowly, his eyes tracing the outline of her form. She was tall, graceful, and yet fragile in a way that made his chest ache. She looked like she had been carrying grief for a long time, and now it poured into the air around them. Sarai stepped closer, her hands reaching out hesitantly, almost afraid to touch him. When she brushed her fingers lightly across his dirt-streaked face, Elias flinched, but only slightly. She was careful, tender, as if her touch could remind him of the life he had almost lost. I remember you," she said softly, almost to herself. "Before the war, you stood beside our ambassador. You watched over him. You were always there, quiet but alive." The memory struck Elias like a soft hammer. Months before the war, he had been a young soldier assigned to protect diplomats. He had never imagined those months of calm, negotiation, and quiet attention would be remembered by someone from another species. But here was Sarai, remembering him clearly, as if his life mattered more than any battlefield could erase. She led him to a small tent, one that had survived the blasts and fire. Inside, she made him sit on a rough mat while she went to fetch water. Every movement she made seemed deliberate, careful, as though the world outside had become too dangerous for gentle gestures. When she returned, she poured water into her own hands and let Elias drink from them, cupping the liquid carefully so none would spill. There was a softness in her gaze, a warmth that reminded him of home, a home he was no longer certain existed. "We held a memorial for you," Sarai said quietly as he drank. We thought you were dead. I cried for you, Elias. I thought I had lost you forever." Her words hit him harder than any battle ever could. Someone from an alien race had mourned him. Someone who had once been an enemy, or at least distant and unknown, had cared enough to grieve. He felt a lump in his throat. He had expected strangers to fight, to kill, to forget, but not to feel, not to hope. I don't know how I survived," Elias admitted finally. "I don't even know why I'm here." Sarai's hand rested on his shoulder, firm and grounding. "Perhaps it was not luck," she said. "Perhaps you were meant to return, not to fight, not to kill, but to remind us that life, even after war, is stronger than death." For the first time since waking, Elias allowed himself to relax. The tension in his limbs began to fade, replaced by a strange, fragile peace. He realized that the war had not ended for him just because he survived the blast. It had ended because someone extraordinary, had refused to let him disappear. As evening fell outside, the colors of the sky deepened to purple and gold. Sarai stayed beside him, not speaking, only watching the distant horizon. In that quiet moment, Elias understood something he had never known, that survival was more than a chance. It was connection. It was the fragile thread of hope that even across worlds, life could matter enough to be remembered, to be mourned, and to be saved. And in that moment, the ruins did not feel empty anymore. They were alive with memory, grief, and the beginning of something new. Elias finally met Sarai's gaze, and for the first time since the war, he allowed himself to hope. The night was quiet but not peaceful. Outside the small alien shelter, the world still trembled with the scars of war. Fires from the last battles burned low, casting shadows that twisted and stretched across the broken landscape. Elias could hear the occasional crack of distant metal collapsing, reminders that destruction had no true end. He shivered, not from cold, but from the weight of knowing he had survived when so many had not. Sarai stayed near him, her presence steady but alert. She did not speak of her people's plans, or of the alien commanders who argued endlessly in the distance. She only looked at him with a mixture of relief and worry, as if carrying the burden of knowing someone she had cared for could vanish again at any moment. "They will not believe you are alive," she said softly, breaking the silence. "Even if I speak for you, some will think you are a ghost or a trick. Some will want to fight you again." Elias studied her face, and for the first time he realized how fragile peace could be. She was not weak, far from it, but her power did not lie in strength. It lay in her courage, in the way she her own people to protect him, in the way she had chosen hope over fear. He swallowed, feeling the enormity of what that meant. Hours passed, and distant voices grew louder. Alien commanders were arguing fiercely. Elias could hear the edge of fear and anger in their tones. Some wanted to keep him as a prisoner, to display the human who had somehow survived what was meant to destroy him. Others argued that harming him might reignite a conflict that both sides had longed to end. The tension felt like a living thing, wrapping around Elias like invisible chains. Sarai placed her hand on his arm. "Do not move unless I say, your survival is dangerous now, not for you, but for all of us." Elias nodded, understanding. He had thought surviving the blast was enough. He had thought returning from death would bring relief. But war did not end with a single person surviving. The world still demanded choices. The world still demanded courage. Night deepened. Stars hung low, pale, and distant. Sarai finally sat beside him and began speaking in a whisper, as though telling a story no one else could hear. She spoke of humans she had known, of diplomats and soldiers, of moments when her people saw the stubborn light in humanity and wondered why they never gave up, even when the odds were hopeless. "You are like them," she said finally, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Even now, even when everything is broken, you rise again. That is why I never let you go, even in my heart." Elias felt tears burn behind his eyes. He had always thought his life mattered little, that he was just a soldier in a war too vast to care about him. Yet here was an alien, someone who had once been his enemy, who mourned him, who had kept hope alive for him, who now sat quietly beside him in the darkness. He wanted to speak, to say something that could match the depth of what she had said. But words failed. Instead, he placed his hand over hers, a simple gesture heavy with gratitude, trust, and a silent promise that he would survive, not just for himself, but because someone believed he could. For the first time since the blast, Elias allowed himself to feel something other than fear and pain. He felt connection. He felt fragile, trembling hope, and he understood that surviving was only the beginning. The real challenge was returning to the world that had already forgotten him, and proving that life, courage, and empathy could endure beyond the shadow of war. Outside, the ruins whispered with wind and distant echoes. Inside, Elias and Sarai sat together, two lives that had survived death, two hearts learning that even across worlds, empathy could be stronger than hatred, and hope could outlast despair. And for the first time in months, the war did not feel like the end of everything. It felt like a beginning. The first light of dawn barely touched the battlefield when the alarm sounded. A high-pitched mechanical wail echoed across the ruins, shaking dust from collapsed structures and rattling the scorched earth beneath their feet. Elias' heart jumped. He had thought the war was over, thought the silence meant safety. But the sound told him otherwise. Danger was still alive. Sarai grabbed his arm with a force that surprised him. "Human machines," she whispered, her voice tense. "They're scouts. They are searching the area. If they find you, you will be seen as a captive." Elias' stomach twisted. Humans, alive, searching. He had survived the blast, the ruins, and the alien camp, only to face his own people in a field he barely recognized. He looked at Sarai, her eyes wide but steady, and realized the risk she was taking just by staying beside him. Every instinct told him to run. But there was no running, not now, not from the responsibility of surviving. Outside the shelter, the distant hum of hovering machines grew louder. Alien soldiers moved into position, weapons glinting in the dim light. Their long limbs and shimmering armor seemed almost fluid, moving with precision and caution. They were prepared for combat, but Elias knew they were also unprepared for what his presence might bring. A confrontation neither side wanted, yet one they might be forced into. Sarai pulled him into the bunker, sealing the thick, reinforced door. Inside, the air felt heavy and tense, as though it held its breath for the coming storm. Elias leaned against the wall, trying to steady his shaking hands. "What now?" he asked quietly. "You stay hidden," Sarai replied. Her hand brushed against his shoulder briefly, a grounding presence amid chaos. "If they see you here, it will not end peacefully, trust me." The bunker walls vibrated as the drones passed overhead, their sensors scanning for movement, for heat, for life. Elias could hear the faint buzz of electronics and the low murmur of alien voices through the reinforced door. Each vibration made his chest tighten, each hum set his nerves on edge. But in that moment, looking at Sarai's determined expression, he felt a strange calm. Somehow, he knew that if she believed in his survival, he could endure whatever came next. Hours passed. Outside, the war machines circled, searching, scanning, probing the ruins. Inside, Sarai and Elias sat together in silence. She did not speak, only watched him, her silver eyes reflecting worry, exhaustion, and a fierce determination that made his chest ache. Finally, she broke the quiet. "I have seen humans do many things," she said softly. "They fight, they destroy, they fear, but they also survive. They care for each other, even in impossible times. You are one of them. That is why you are alive. That is why you must endure." Elias swallowed. The words were simple, but they carried weight heavier than any weapon he had faced. He realized that survival alone was not enough. He had to show that hope could exist even in the ruins, that humanity's stubborn courage could reach across worlds, across species, and still make a difference. The sound of approaching engines grew louder, closer. Outside, alien soldiers braced, but Elias did not flinch. He felt Sarai's hand press gently against his, a silent signal that he was not alone. "I will not hide," he said quietly, surprising himself. "I will not let fear decide this. I will face them. If we are to survive, we must show them the truth." Her silver eyes widened, a mixture of fear and pride shining in them. She did not speak, only nodded, her hand holding his firmly. For a brief moment in the heart of the war-torn field, humanity and alien courage stood side by side, ready to face the impossible together. And in that tense, trembling dawn, Elias realized that survival was no longer about living. It was about standing, facing what came next, and showing the universe that even in death, even in ruins, hope could rise again. The morning air felt thick and tense as Elias stepped out of the bunker, Sarai's hand still brushing against his for support. The ruined battlefield stretched before him like a dark memory, twisted metal, scorched earth, and distant fires burning quietly in the ruins. Above, human drones hovered silently, scanning every shadow, every movement, ready to strike at the first sign of danger. Elias' heart pounded, but he did not move back. He had survived the impossible, and now he could not let fear rule him. Behind him, Sarai stood, calm but alert, her silver eyes watching every corner, every shadow. Her presence gave him courage, though he knew it was fragile. One wrong step, and the fragile hope between them could shatter. He took a deep breath, feeling the wind lift dust and ash around him. "I have to do this," he said softly. "If they see me as a prisoner, if they think you captured me, more blood will be spilled." Sarai nodded, her expression unreadable, but Elias could feel the silent strength she offered. She had already risked everything by helping him survive. Now he would risk everything by stepping forward. He walked into the open field, each step deliberate, every movement careful. Alien soldiers flanked him, weapons raised but not aiming, ready to protect but not to strike. The drones above followed his every motion, recording, transmitting, calculating. Elias knew they were watching him as if he were a ghost returned from the dead. Then a loud, mechanical voice boomed from one of the drones. "Identify yourself." Elias stopped and raised his hands, open and empty. "I am Sergeant Elias," he called out, his voice steady despite the fear tightening his chest. "A surviving human soldier of the 3rd Defense Line. I am alive, and I am standing here with those who saved me." The field seemed to hold its breath. The hum of drones filled the space with tension. And then, from the distance, human boots struck the ground. 6 soldiers, armored and alert, came into view, weapons raised toward the alien camp. Their eyes widened as they saw him, disbelief and shock breaking across their faces. "Elias," one of them whispered, lowering his weapon slightly. It was Captain, the leader of the squad Elias had thought was gone forever. "I'm alive," Elias said simply, "and I'm not alone." The soldiers froze. The alien soldiers behind him shifted slightly, weapons ready but hesitant. Elias looked at Sarai, then back at his own people. The silence stretched, heavy and fragile like the calm before a storm. But no one moved to fire. The truth of his survival hung in the air, stronger than any gun or missile. Elias took a step forward, then another. His voice carried over the field. "I am not a prisoner. They saved me. They did not let me die when they could have. I stand here because life, hope, courage is stronger than war." Sarai's hand moved to his shoulder, steadying him. Her eyes met his, glowing softly in the early light. He felt her belief, her faith in him, and it steadied his own trembling heart. One of the humans lowered his weapon completely. Another followed. Slowly, one by one, the human soldiers lowered their weapons, eyes still wide with shock, faces pale but slowly softening. Elias' words, the simple truth of survival and trust, were breaking the invisible wall of hatred and fear that had grown over the battlefield. The drones hovered silently, waiting. The alien soldiers relaxed slightly, still cautious but no longer ready to strike. And in that moment, Elias realized that he had crossed a line, not just into enemy sight, but into the possibility of peace. He did not know what would come next. He only knew that standing here, risking everything, had begun something new. A fragile, trembling bridge between two worlds that had long believed they were destined to destroy each other. Elias took a deep breath, feeling the wind lift dust around him. He had survived the blast. He had returned from death. And now, with Sarai at his side, he would survive the war's lingering shadow and maybe, just maybe, teach both sides what it meant to truly live again. The humans stood frozen on the battlefield, their rifles lowered but still gripped tightly in trembling hands. The alien soldiers mirrored them, cautious, weapons poised but not aimed. The air was thick with tension, every shadow a threat, every movement a possible spark for violence. Elias felt the weight of both worlds pressing on him, a heavy burden he had never imagined carrying. He took a careful step forward, his boots crunching on scorched earth. The wind lifted dust around him, circling like it too wanted to witness what was about to happen. Sarai stayed close behind, silent but present, her eyes fixed on the humans with quiet resolve. Her faith in him, unspoken yet palpable, gave him strength. "I survived the blast," Elias began, his voice clear and steady. "I survived when everyone thought I was gone, but survival is not enough if it brings more death." The soldiers on both sides did not move. Some of the humans' eyes softened as they recognized his voice, his presence, the undeniable proof that he had truly come back from death. Captain's face, pale with disbelief, reflected relief so strong it seemed painful. "Elias, we thought you were dead," he said, voice shaking. "Yes," Elias replied, "and they thought I was dead too." He nodded toward the alien soldiers. "They saved me. When they could have left me to die, they did not. That is proof that even after war, trust, hope, and life matter more than hatred." One of the human soldiers lowered his weapon completely. Another followed, staring at the alien camp as though seeing it for the first time. The tension began to shift, subtle but undeniable. The air, heavy with fear moments ago, now carried the fragile possibility of understanding. Sarai stepped forward slightly, her voice soft but firm. "I did not cry for him because he is special," she said, her silver eyes shining with emotion. "I cried for him because all life matters, all hope matters, and if a human can survive what we believed impossible, then maybe we can all survive this war together." The words hung in the air like a fragile thread connecting the two sides. Elias looked at Sarai, feeling gratitude and awe. She had risked everything, her own commanders, to give him a chance. Now, together, they were offering a chance for peace, for understanding, for a new beginning. The human soldiers lowered their weapons completely. Some stepped forward, cautious but curious. One of the alien commanders hesitated, then nodded slowly. The machines hovering above scanned and recorded but did not fire. For the first time in months, the battlefield was silent, not with fear but with attention. Elias took a deep breath and raised his hand slightly. "Look around," he said. "This land, these ruins, they do not belong to any one side. They belong to all of us who survived. And if we continue to fight, nothing we love will survive. But if we choose to see each other, if we choose life over death, then maybe we can rebuild." A human soldier finally stepped forward, extending a hand toward an alien soldier. The alien hesitated, then reached back, gripping it firmly. One by one, more hands joined, human and alien alike. Elias watched, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. He had survived death, and now he was witnessing something stronger, the courage to forgive, to trust, and to move forward. Sarai's hand brushed against his arm. "You changed everything," she whispered. Elias shook his head, smiling faintly. "No, you changed everything. You believed life mattered enough to save me. That is why we are here, not by accident, but by choice." The sound of distant wind and rustling debris filled the battlefield, but it no longer felt hostile. The drones hovered quietly, alien soldiers lowered their weapons, and humans exhaled long-held breaths. In that fragile, trembling moment, the impossible became real. Two worlds, once ready to destroy each other, had found a single truth stronger than weapons: life, hope, and trust. Elias looked around at the faces, human and alien, and realized that survival alone was not enough. To live was to act, to risk, to show that courage and empathy could reach across species, across scars, across worlds. And in this first step toward peace, he felt the weight of his own survival transform into something greater, a promise that the future could be different if only they chose it. The sun rose slowly over the ruined battlefield, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Dust swirled gently in the morning light, but for the first time in months, the battlefield did not feel like a grave. It felt like a place where life had returned, fragile but unbroken. Elias stood in the center, watching both humans and aliens cautiously lower their weapons. The silence was no longer heavy. It was hopeful, trembling, but real. Sarai stood beside him, her silver eyes reflecting the sunrise. There was a softness in her gaze that Elias had never seen in any other being, human or alien. It was the look of someone who had risked everything, who had believed in life when all signs pointed to death. Her hand rested briefly on his arm, a silent reminder that he had not survived alone. Humans and aliens approached each other slowly, unsure of what to say, but determined not to destroy what had just begun. Some shook hands, others simply nodded. There were tears, human and alien alike, and for the first time, Elias realized that grief and relief could coexist. That survival was not just about living, but about being present, being seen, being remembered. Captain approached Elias, his expression a mix of disbelief and gratitude. I thought I lost you," he said quietly. "We all thought you were gone." Elias smiled faintly, the weight of his journey pressing on his shoulders but not breaking him. "I survived because someone believed I could," he said, glancing at Sarai. "And now we all have a choice to continue the hatred or to build something new." The alien commanders finally stepped forward, their expressions cautious but accepting. One of them spoke in their melodic, soft voice. "We have seen courage that transcends our war. If a human can survive what we believed impossible, perhaps the war itself was never meant to define us." A human soldier, still shaking from shock, extended his hand toward an alien beside him. The alien hesitated, then gripped it firmly. One by one, hands met across the battlefield, human to alien, soldier to soldier. Elias watched, heart swelling, as the impossible became reality. Hope, fragile yet unwavering, was taking root. Sarai turned to him, whispering words that made his chest ache with emotion. "When I saw you alive, I thought the universe had played a trick on me. But now I see it was showing me that life, even in the darkest places, can rise again." Elias placed his hand over hers, the gesture simple but full of meaning. "You didn't just save me," he said. "You reminded me why surviving is worth everything, not for revenge, not for war, for life, for hope, for this moment." Evacuation shuttles arrived, carrying both humans and aliens, wounded and weary, yet alive. There were no chains, no guards, no suspicion. Only survivors walking together, leaving behind the ruins, leaving behind the hatred, stepping into a future neither species had dared imagine. Elias stood at the edge of the field one last time, looking at the landscape. Fires burned low, twisted metal lay broken, but the air was no longer heavy with despair. The battlefield had witnessed death, but now it witnessed a choice. The choice to survive, to trust, to believe. Sarai's hand squeezed his gently, a quiet anchor in a world reborn. "We cannot undo the past," she said, "but we can decide what comes next. And you reminded us that life is stronger than fear, stronger than war." Elias nodded, feeling a warmth he had not felt in months. For the first time, he did not feel like a survivor of destruction. He felt like a witness to something far greater, proof that humanity, even in its smallest, most fragile moments, could rise above the shadow of death and violence. As the shuttles carried everyone away, leaving the ruins behind, Elias and Sarai walked together toward the dawn. Each step was light, yet heavy with the weight of all that had been lost and all that could now be gained. Around them, two species once divided by war now moved forward, united by the simple truth that life, courage, and hope could endure. And in that first golden light, the battlefield no longer seemed empty. It shimmered with possibility. Elias understood finally that surviving was never enough on its own. To live was to act, to connect, to believe. And together, with humans, with aliens, with those who chose hope over hatred, they would build a future that no war could destroy. The sun rose fully. The wind whispered over the scars of the battlefield, carrying the fragile, unbroken truth. Life had returned, and with it, the courage to begin again.